Well, good morning. Today is February 21st. Some people will call it Fat Tuesday or the start of
Mardi Gras.
Mardi Gras, but I like to just call it just another great Tuesday. So, as we get into this law today, today's law is or the principle of perseverance. I want to first go back and highlight kind of what we've looked at, because the principle of perseverance for me is very, very important, but you got to know what you're the architect of. So, with that being said, we look at going back to law one, the law of the architect. The law of the architect is basically you understanding and knowing what you're going to be in charge of. And again, that doesn't have to be a small business owner, it doesn't have to be an entrepreneur. You could still be an executive, you could be a manager within your own as a W 2 business, but you have to understand the skill sets. But understanding where each one of those skill sets lie to get your job done most effectively is leads us right into our second law, which is the law of exchange. And when you're able to know what your vision is, what your goals are for whatever that may be, you can now create an exchange because you know where your weaknesses lie. You know where your opportunities lie to borrow time from other people to move forward. Which, if you're able to, understand the law of the architect, create a fair exchange, now you're getting into the law of open cycles. The law of open cycles is going to say, hey, don't try to do everything, because if you try doing everything, you're just not going to succeed, because you're going to run out of time and you're going to run out of knowledge or skill sets to be able to achieve it at your maximum effort. We all like to think that we can do that. And as I've said in the past, you have your humility and ability, but your humility should always be above your ability. And that's knowing where to say, hey, I need help. And as I said last week, if you're struggling, find someone to be real with. And then that struggle will almost, I won't say disappear, but you're going to find someone that's going to help you with that struggle because you're being real. That takes us into being the principle of present. The principle of present for is knowing where you are at that moment, understanding what has led you to that moment, and knowing where you're going, but you have to be present in that moment to be able to facilitate change within those moments. Because if we're always forecasting out, we're never going to be able to change the day. We can always have big, lofty ideas, but that's all they are, is big, lofty ideas. We're never putting action behind that. That gets us into the law of separation. Law of separation is understanding where you have to divide, and where you have to segment things and how to do those things, in the best way possible. So again, the law of separation, I think, directly ties into the law of open cycles, because if you cannot separate these certain tasks, you're always going to be fumbling over what you're looking for. And then the law of hindrance is what your fears are and what your trust is. As we discussed last week, which was, I think, was an amazing conversation. So, if you don't remember, I suggest you go back and watch the recording. But trust is an underlying theme. If you don't trust someone, you can't empower them to go forth and utilize that time that you've provided them, or the time that they're providing you to create this generational wealth, which now ties us into something that circles everything back to you. This law does not have, I don't think, has any bearing on the people around you, um, that you're doing business with, directly. I think it has more an internal factor to what it looks like for you. And the principle of perseverance is knowing what your passions are. Some people say that your passions are directly tied to what your skills are and what you're going to be making money at, possibly. But there are people that, I love in the law, they talk about photography. They talk about, different things like for me, I like playing golf. That's one of my happy spots. So if I can get out and play golf, a couple times a week, I'm in a great spot, and I can persevere through anything because I've been able to fulfill a passion of mine. But golf is not what I'm the architect of. golf just gives me my happy place. Kind of referring to the Happy Gilmore movie. So if you haven't seen it, it's quite funny. But find your happy place, because when things get tough, and we are not guaranteed success, we are guaranteed trials and tribulations, and we are guaranteed things that are obstacles that we're going to have to overcome. And with anything that we're looking to accomplish in life, there's always going to be a hardship or trial or tribulation that we're having to come through. But knowing where you can lean to have people help you with that is absolutely phenomenal. But if it's something where if you just lose all of your momentum and all your willpower, that's because you have not found a passion. That's something because you have lost the drive. And Dan has said, or our viceroy has said many times, that people stop 5 minutes before payout. And this right here, the principle of perseverance, is, I think, something that you have to almost go take it back to the law of the architect and say, where am I most happy? Like for me, I have 2 children. I love spending time with them, but also know that I have children and they're not always going to be a part of my life, because they're going to grow up, they're going to go to college, or they're going to go to trade school, they're going to move out, and it's going to be my wife and I. It's not that I don't love them, but they are not the reason I work as hard as I do. Some people might say that's selfish. Me being the best husband possible is not why I work as hard as I do. And that is another thing that we have to look at. And this law kind of points out, because they give an example. So I think each of us, we have to really do an autopsy of ourselves and say, what is our passion? And right now in one of my businesses, I'm going through a new iteration. This might be my 3rd or 4th iteration, but it may bring me closer to what I say is bring me to principle of perseverance. And I've said, if I can have my scotch, whiskey, and golf, and be able to, do those things in a social environment and create opportunities for people to connect, that's all I need. Because I'm able to be outside, I'm able to communicate with people, I'm able to be a social butterfly, I'm also able to bring people together. Now, all those things are tied into a simple thing. Now, I might say that where I'm the law of the architect ties into this here, but it doesn't right now. And it may never do that, but one will facilitate the other. The architect will provide you the means in which you can find those things that give you those passions and fulfill you, so you can persevere through the hard times. But your perseverance and having those things of joy that bring value to your life and just fill your heart up is going to allow you the opportunity to persevere when you're the architect and to really drive through. And these things we have to look at almost succinctly, but we also must be able to separate these two things if they are not mutually the same. And it's okay if they're not mutually the same. And if they are the same, that's even more to you, because you should be able to have more drive, more passion than anybody else, because what gives you that perseverance to drive through when times get hard. If that's what you're making money at, then you should be able to work 18, 20 hours a day, for, a couple months on end. That's not to say that that's where you want to be, but as you're building a business and creating the law of exchange and different things, you have to be able to persevere and get hard on yourself and show people where you can find success, because people are only going to follow you when you're successful, not when you're unsuccessful. And it's funny, there's a saying that I've seen on social media. It says, support your friends and family the way you support the celebrity that doesn't even know you. Because a lot of people on social media, they're always liking, clicking, hey, whoever the influencer might be. I'm not going to name anybody because I really don't care about these influencers. But we tend to like their stuff more than we like our friends' stuff. And for anybody that's been on a call with me in the Alliance over the last year, people have always in the alliance, they say, hey, what can I do for you? How can I help you? And I've said, like, share, comment, pretty simple. It takes you about 3 seconds to do one of those. And the comment might take a little bit longer, but that's just showing support, because that is, hey, I see what you're doing, and I'm happy for you. It doesn't have to come in a monetary form. But sometimes, like for me, my love language is words of affirmation. And that like, share, or comment is you giving me those words of affirmation without even having to say a single thing. And that's selfish, because that's me. But I can also verbalize that, because I've been figuring out what makes me tick, what makes me better for the people around me. So that allows me to be present in those moments, allows me to fully articulate a clearer passage than I was 3 years ago about what I'm the architect of and how I'm going to get there. But this right here, principle of perseverance, like I said earlier, before everyone hopped on, I have a hard stop today at 9:50 because I have some stuff that I have to do. But it's going to take me to our principle of perseverance, because one, I'm going to be able to interact with people I've never interacted with. I'm going to be able to provide them solutions, possibly, that I may not have ever had before. So it's going to allow me to expand my network. And for those that have seen my social media posts over the last week or 10 days, it's all about, every one of my social media posts says your network is equal to your net worth. And each and every one of you on this call is an extension of my network. We may never, ever do business together, but I guarantee through this time, we're all going to know each other and say, hey, you should reach out to this person. I think y'all would at least connect. I'm not saying you're going to do business together, but connect with each other, because I think in that connection, you build a trust, which goes back to last week's law, the law of hindrance. So as always, I've kind of rambled on for about 10, 15 minutes here. So I want to pause, let someone come in. I think I know who might go first, because she's already grinning. And then we'll go on. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So this is such an amazing law or principle. And the question is, okay, so one has perseverance, and you persevere. It's something that you're passionate about, and you do it for free. Like, so let's say cake making, for example. And if people stop 5 minutes before they hit the jackpot, I mean, like, my question always is, well, how do I know that it's not the next 5 minutes and it's that this really is tomfoolery, or, this is, I need to go do something different. And it doesn't have to be cakes. I mean, it can be anything, because my thought is, at some point, I mean, that 5 minutes, always thinking that it's just around the corner, you become like the rat in the maze that is looking for that pellet, right? And that's what I think of. And it's like, how do you know? I mean, because like for me, I mean, I could sink my entire life into making cakes and lose my shirt and everything I have, just because I love it so much. And 5 minutes, okay, well, it could be. And like, meanwhile, I'm I'm destitute and making cakes in, a soup kitchen or something. But but I mean, that's not going to happen. But I'm just using it as an extreme example. Like, just how do you know? Is it, how long do you persevere for, until forever?
I think this is a great question to ask. And I think this is why we go through these laws. And as I haven't mentioned the illustration, but the dream catcher, the law of separation. If you go back to that law and read through it, listen to it, you're gonna hear them talk about making new iterations. But what your end goal, shooting for Mars, might be, you can't get to Mars unless you pass the moon, or unless you get through the atmosphere. You have to set goals along the way, goals that are measurable, that are attainable. And again, because Dan is our viceroy and he's the mathematician, the way his mind works, I think you really have to set goals that are measurable, that you can look at both successes and the failures within that. And that way you can constantly improve. And you set these goals, you might set them on a 30-day, a 60-day, or as we learned last week, a 66-day. Again, whatever works for you. You can do 45-day. You can do 28 days. It doesn't matter. Set goals, set a time frame. Say, hey, I want to achieve these goals within this time. And if that is your intent, that is your extreme focus to hit that goal within that period of time, you're going to hit it, or you're not going to hit it. You're going to do one of two. It's not going to be a one or the other, or hey, there's a gray area. No, you're going to either hit it or you're not. But if you don't hit it, you can say, all right, why did I not hit it? If I did hit it, did I achieve 30% more, 40% more, 10% more? How? And put forth goals. But if my goal is, as I sit here on the East Coast, to drive to Los Angeles, California within 3 days, and I don't have a map, why do I just take all the roads that say east? Well, I'm going to wind up in the ocean. I'm not going to wind up on the West Coast. But if I take all the signs that say west, am I going to get there in 3 days' time? So now I have a destination, I have a goal. My destination is Los Angeles. My goal is 3 days. Everything, and this is the law of separation, because you have to be able to separate your vision from the path. Because your path, you're going to have obstacles. You're going to have things that are going to cause you to adapt and overcome. So with that, I think that's where that lies for you. If you say, hey, for me, I would like to be, because I love baking, I would like to be, there's a place here in Atlanta called Gigi's Cupcakes that shut down in 2020. But lady started making her cupcakes in her kitchen. She mass produced the recipe, started franchising it, and then you walk into this cupcake place and all these franchises. So that may be what you want to do. You're like, hey, this is my cake batter. This is my icing, buttercream, whatever it may be. These are the steps. And I'm not going to work in the business. I'm going to create something that's proprietary to me, the intellectual property, and then sell that and then allow that to make me revenue. And then I'm only going to I can cherry pick what I want it to do. But again, you have to know what your goal is, but you have to know how to build it in steps. If you cannot build it in steps, then you're always going to go, this is tomfoolery. What am I missing? And so that's where I think going back to the law of separation, it allows you to really identify principle of presence, perseverance.
That makes a ton of sense. Thank you. That's super.
Absolutely. Anybody else? Okay. So with that, those examples, that's how, when you're invested in the laws, and I love the principle of perseverance because it talks about later in the law, faith. And I know we're not a religious or political organization, but if you want to be good at anything, you have to practice at everything you do. And if you want to be a good leader, you have to put yourself in a position to also be a servant, because you have to gain perspective. Because if you're always a leader, you're not going to be able to humble yourself to be able to be present enough to be a servitude. Because I've alluded to, I think in the second or third law, there's two pyramids that we normally see when we see the leadership triangle. It's either the leader at the top here, or when it's inverted, and the leader's at the bottom supporting the entire organization. I don't know which one's right, but I personally think the one where the leader's at the bottom, because he has made himself, as my friend and the person who brought me in the last, Jason Duncan, has said, make yourself a non-essential employee. You've built your business in such a way that you're non-essential. That way you can step away. If your business fails because you're not there, You're not an entrepreneur. You're a small business owner. You've created a prison and you have to create a way out. So how do you do that? Fair exchange. Know where your open cycles lie and know how to create a true separation, and also know where your trust is not put in, who you're not putting trust in, because if you're not able to step away, you're not trusting someone to do the job that they're supposed to do. So, but all those things put a lot of pressure on everybody. It can become tiresome, it can become bothersome, because for me, I like providing, again, words of affirmation because that's my love language, but I also want to pour that out into other people. That may not be their love language, but that's what I do. But if I have to reprimand or try to critique, it's harder for me to do those things than it is for me to praise someone. If you've ever heard me talk about someone else, it's in reverence. It's in putting them up on a pedestal. And you may say, hey, Matt's the industry leader, or Matt's the person. But I'm now, if you think of me as that and I'm introducing this person, again, we're jumping ahead, but that's leverage. You're looking at the leverage position I have and you're saying, well, Matt's has put this person here. I'm going to give that same person the same respect and gratitude that I have for Matt. The same that we would do for Dan. If Dan were to call any of us up right now and say, hey, I got someone you to meet, you're like, heck yeah, I'm going to call him right now. I'm going to email him right now, because you're being brought to the conversation. And I can't remember if I've said this on these recordings, but one of the things that I've said in my business career, I cannot win every job. I cannot win everything, quote, that comes across my desk. I cannot do it. It's impossible. But I can be a part of every conversation. And if I'm a part of every conversation, that gives me the opportunity to be successful. But people have to think about me in a proper light. People have to know what I do to say, Matt should be a part of this conversation. And whether that's being the people connector I am, whether it being in the energy, electrical space that I'm in, or just me trying to provide outside opinion or counsel of an outsider's perspective. Because anytime we spend too much time in a business, we put on rose-colored glasses and we can only see what we want our vision to be. We're not able to see how to grow our customer base because we've lost track of maybe who our customers are. And if you don't know who your customers are, how are you going to find new ones? How are you going to find new people? I know Philip referenced last week, doing government work, things like that. They're awesome. But, how do you scale? Because we could say, all right, well, let's take every county in the state of Georgia. I think it's 177 counties in the state of Georgia. So, and let's say Philip was to get all of them and take all of the stuff that's in English text and convert that 177 counties to 4 different languages. Spanish, because he mentioned that. Let's say Mandarin, and 2 other languages. Phillips right now, I can see his mind working. He already knows county calculation of what that's going to earn him. Is that generational wealth, or is that just a nice sell? But Philip has also been looking to do other things like language software where you call into a number, hey, I need an interpreter and you can do that, or partnering with things like that. So he's utilizing his talents and resources to expand his network to be able to provide more value. Because if you've now taken all 177 counties, converted it 4 times, you got X revenue. How do you continue to provide value or recurring revenue stream? And that is something that we have to look at. How do we create these recurring revenues? Because again, our active hours, we all have learned that we all have the same number of hours, unless someone found more hours in a week than I have. We've learned that, creating a fair exchange is borrowing other people's time. But to really achieve generational wealth, we have to have our money making money for us. And our money making money for us is that intellectual property, which goes right back to the law of the architect. What are we the architect of? And again, if you're a W-2 employee, that's where you invest. Because I might be a 1099 employee. I might also be a W-2 employee. But how I make my money is, works perfectly well for me. And I can easily say I'm very comfortable. But how do we get there? And those are the things that we're trying to unpack to allow us to be the architect of something, but also find it the privilege and the ability to do what fills our soul, fills our reservoir. So when times get tough, we can say, you know what, I can buckle down for a little bit and just really push through, because sometimes you have to get back into it, but that's not where you want to be, because you're working on the business. That's fine. You don't want to be in the business. So any other comments or?
Good morning.
Morning. How are you doing, bud?
So I'm pretty quiet. I'm pretty quiet today. You've got, my brain is just all over the map. I'm currently shifting from being a lone agent in the real estate world to building a team. So there's a lot that is changing right now. And I just have, every time we come on a call like this, it gets me fired up to keep going, the perseverance, and just to, I don't know, it's more of a comment than anything, just trying to build it so I can scale all these pieces. I can see it. And the more we go along, the more I can visualize where I need to go with it based on what we keep talking about. So I just wanted to throw that out there. So I appreciate this. Thank you. And that's my comment for now.
Yeah. Well, one of the things, you and I, when we first started these calls, 7 weeks ago, I said, I have my real estate license, but I don't actively take people around in a car or anything out there. Because doesn't make me happy at all. So I put my license in what we call holding status. So I can only buy and sell my own personal properties, which I've done a little bit, not much. I haven't done anything in the last 4 years. But in 2022, I had 6 referrals. And so I had people that I said, hey, you need help buying a house, or selling a house, let me know. And because I had known them, I was like, one of the guys, I said, hey, you're looking for a big green egg when you buy your house? I'll be your housewarming present because my referral check will cover it. So, he wanted a big green egg. So he's like, heck yeah. But because I'm getting the referral from an agent, it's a 1099 to me, and I can do whatever with the money I want. Now I'm giving away money that, was paid to me, but that money would have never been paid to me unless he would have bought the house. But also with agents that I know outside of the state that may not have reciprocity here or have referral agreements, I'm like, hey, just if you got someone, let me know, and I'll cut you in on half the referral. It's basically free money because someone else is doing the work. And I had, in 2022, I had 3 of those. But they could easily have, put forth the time to get a referral agreement, or, because they work for a national realtor company or real estate company, they probably could have, had that done very easily. But they're like, I'm probably not going to get as much. And, this benefits you, benefits me. But that was just, passive, it's very, very passive. And 2022 was probably the best out of 4 years I've had in that. But you have to communicate. You have to build these things. You have to know those influential points to help drive that. And I think for building a team, like I look at where my license is held, and the guy, when I put my license there 12 years ago, He had 10 agents. Bye. He had 10 agents with him. And now he's got over 160. But he was out there generating his own business. But he's like, all right, well, I can't be at this closing. I can't be at this closing. I can't show this house and show this house. So he started saying, hey, for these new agents that are just getting their license, or, you know, he's like, here, you take this and I'll be here to support you. So he was generating the rain to fertilize the field. Now the crop is grown and he's able to bear the fruit.
That's exactly what I'm doing right now. I want to be that person. So kind of take back my time. I love to teach, and I do teach a lot of other realtors right now. So if I can go and put it together for myself and have that kind of structure moving forward, it's a win-win. I get to help, I get to teach, and then I don't have to go to all those showings, and because I'm stretched so thin, and with my kids and everything, it's non-negotiable that I have to be at their events and all that. And I just don't like being pulled so much like that anymore. Getting too old for this stuff.
Well, I'm glad you said non-negotiable. I don't think it was referenced in any of the laws that we've gone over so far, but I've heard it referenced by a Gentry class member inside the Alliance that there are non-negotiables. And one of his non-negotiables is Friday night. Anything after 5 p.m. on Friday is non-negotiable. He will not set any time on Friday after 5 p.m. because that's time with his wife and kids. That's date night. It's a non-negotiable. And that right there, I would almost guarantee is principal perseverance, because he's able to connect and spend time with those who he works hard for. Not to say he works hard just for them. He has other passions, but, you know, he's said this is non-negotiable, and those are things that you have to hold true to. Is like before we hit record, you know, I was asking Philip if he was going to an event. He's like, no, I go to, you know, probably 2 a year. And, you know, I told him, you know, in January, I had my calendar 90% booked through the month of June. So there are non-negotiables, you know, and like I even had to cancel an event because, you know, my wife's schedule came out and it's like she's working nights. I was like, that's not fair to my kids for both of us to be away. You know, yes, I have childcare, but, you know, why put that on someone else? I mean, that's time for, you know, for one-on-one with my kids, for me to imprint, for me to leave an impression on my kids when they're the most impressionable. So
it's foundational too. I think they need to have you around. You know, they can see how hard you work, but when you show that you give them that time, they appreciate it. They see it. So I agree.
Yep. All right, Philip, comments?
I'm impressed in this law principle about this question, what do you want? I think it's very unfair. You know, I'm in the language business, so if you know, it's about clear communication. If you're looking to ask, you know, what do you want, in just when you're talking to an employee and you ask, what do you want? Obviously, it's something about work related, because that's the life, that's the fishbowl that people are in at that time. But if you ask, what do you want in life? That's very different. And it's, so to me, this, you know, the next line is, what do you want? The coach was being purposely ambiguous. Well, why be purposely ambiguous? Why not just say, you know, what, or if the person says, I don't want to be fired, okay, fine. But then clarify, what do you want in life? As opposed to what do you want in the job or whatever, job related. So, I mean, it's a very interesting way of getting to ask people's passion, but then come out and directly ask, what do you want in life? What is your passion? So this whole way of asking it, to me, is very, unfair is the wrong word, just very misleading, very, I don't know, it's like deliberately trying to trip a person up.
Well, I can see that, but also, to provide another perspective of it, I think so often in time we go down a journey, we go down a path, and we forget where we started, what started that path, what started that journey. And when you're going through personal coaching or anything like that, they don't give you the answers. They ask the questions that are going to allow you to travel back to what made you start this, or things that you can build upon.
Yeah,
And
then
but
you
I
ask.
like I like how they give examples of, like I alluded to earlier, photography, and like I said, I like golf. But sometimes people, even if I were to go out tomorrow to my cigar event here in Atlanta, and I just sit down with people and say, "What do you want in life?" It's going to stump them up because they're not ready for it.
Well,
And I think,
most people don't think about it, but it
yeah,
forces people to think about it.
hmm
Why, why are you working? Why are you doing this?
hmm
Well, yes, it's for my family and it's to pay the mortgage and so forth. Yes, but why are you really doing this?
hmm
So there are ways to get to it without, just, you can get to it and you can get to it directly, but it seems to me that this is a way of tripping people up um, and just not clarifying.
yeah,
And right, most people don't think about it. Most people don't know, but if you press them hard enough, they will know. Like, and I learned from a coach, for example, never ask why questions, WHY, which is very interesting because if you ask why, it puts a person on defensive. Instead, ask a person, how did you come to that conclusion? Or what made you think that? Or how did you, something like that, something very introspective, and it forces people to be introspective.
hmm
A lot of people don't like it. A lot of people don't know how to be introspective, but when you press them at it, um, not why do you think that, but what caused you to come to that conclusion? Whoa, that's a deep one. So how far back, how many layers deep do you have to go to come to that? Well, I heard it somewhere. My mother taught me that, or I listened to this station. Well, what makes you think that that's the correct answer? What makes you think that that person has all the insight, instead of why something? So again, it forces you to be introspective in ways that
hmm
most people aren't accustomed to. So
yeah,
it's just a tangent, but it's like this: what do you want? That's too. You can be deliberate. You can be deliberate about it without being so purposely vague.
yeah. Well, and I think sometimes that it has to happen, and I think it really depends on the person, um, because for me, it directly speaks to my love language of words of affirmation. When people question me, one of my first reactions is to blow my chest, broaden my shoulders, make myself as big as possible, but the further I get into this journey is, the question that they're asking is not to critique, but it's to find out, um, because they're asking because they genuinely care. Um, but some people, you may have to say, well, how did you come to that conclusion? I think both those, you're asking the same thing, but a lot of times in life, um, and going back to the law of the architect, what's your why statement? You know, why is Matt Russell so passionate about connecting people and providing solutions? Why is Matt Russell so gung ho about reaching the summit, but not doing it alone? You know, not, I feel kind of like an egomaniac saying, referring to myself in a third person, but with those things, but I completely understand what you're saying, Philip, and being able to formulate that, in those different questions and continue to press on that, because some people may not press hard enough. They may say, hey, why or how did you come to this conclusion? And some people, I just want to be the best husband I can. I just want to be the best father I can. Well, okay, but what happens when if those things were to go away? Because there's the only thing guaranteed in your life is you. Unfortunately, my kids right now with my grandparents or their grandparents, and something could happen to them, and I don't have my kids anymore. Something could happen to my wife. I don't have my wife anymore. There's a lot of things, but if I'm still alive and kicking, what's the statement for me? Why am I going to persevere when times get tough? And yes, those are horrible things to think about, but if you can really press down and get uncomfortable, because I think when you're uncomfortable, sometimes you're at your most vulnerable. And you don't want to be uncomfortable where you want to fight or be combative. But if you're uncomfortable enough where you can just be real, I think it's a place to be. But I think it's a great conversation to have. And I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. But I love Philip's. How did you come to that conclusion? Because it invites more of a conversation as opposed to reactive. But some people may see that in a different perspective. And again, I don't know which one's which. I'm just kind of trying to summarize these laws so we can see, and see it. But like, this is why these things are so important for me, these calls and getting the perspectives, because these are things that I take with me as, I, do these calls again, maybe later in the year or whatever it may be. But it's, this is going to be something that I will take with me because I haven't thought about it that way. And it gives me new insight, new ideas to, create, hopefully, a better conversation to really connect with people on a more intimate level where you can really grow and see things a little bit differently. Because I'm not saying I'm going to make any of y'all create generational wealth for any of you, but it just allows you to change your perspective by just a half a degree or a degree, and say, all right, well, what am I looking at? That's where growth happens, is because growth doesn't happen when you're comfortable. Growth happens when you're uncomfortable. Ask people that go to the gym. They're not comfortable. All right, so we got 5 minutes left on this. Any other comments?
No, now I'm gonna have to go to the gym. This is great. Thanks again, Matt. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man.
I think with this law of perseverance, principle of perseverance, I guess what reminds me, I've been doing my business for over 30 years, and I probably started my business for the wrong reason. And at the time I was living in San Francisco, and there wasn't any recession. There was like abundant opportunity, but it was so abundant that it literally, if an employer put an ad in for, I want someone with green hair and purple eyes, the employer would hold out until that person emerged. And so I had been working at a job, and oh yes, the earthquake happened in 1989. And basically I just, it was time to leave the job or time to move on. And I started my business partially because I knew no one else would hire me, and it was probably the wrong reason, but it's not that no one else would hire me. It's that I was often a threat to other people. How do I say this without sounding egotistical? It's not about that, but anyway, if I went in for an interview, the interviewer could often perceive that I could potentially take his job. And that's probably true. I could take his job after, a year, 2 or 3. But if the person were secure, then that person would move up in the hierarchy and I would take his job, very obvious. But think so many interviewers felt so threatened that I could take their jobs that it was very hard to get employed by someone else. And so
Yeah.
eventually I decided just to start my own business. And I've stuck to it. Perseverance is sticking to it, partially because I've never had anyone else offer me another position until about 2 or 3 years ago. And then a person offered me a position in his company, but then about a year later, he dropped dead. Well, that didn't help anything. So, so I've just stuck to it because I felt that it's partially that I'm very talented and I can do many things, but also because I never felt that anyone else would hire me into another position.
Yeah.
And I remember being, I was interviewed by Amway, which I'm sure you all heard of.
Mm-hmm.
And they were interested in hiring me to be in their Quebec, Quebec office because I spoke French. And I said, well, that's great. I'd love to do that. What about working also in France? Oh, no, that's someone down the hall. We can't put you there. And said, well, that's also good, but I also speak Japanese. What about doing something for Japan? Oh, no, Japan, that's a totally different building on our campus. It's like they were so pigeonholed, they couldn't see that someone could fulfill multiple positions. And that's what also convinced me that I had to do my own business because people were so narrow-minded about what they were thinking and how they were doing it. And so I've just stuck with it. And so to me, the perseverance is there's no other choice. I do it because I love doing it, but also there's no other choice. I was only offered another job once or twice in my life since I started my business. And in both cases, the person dropped dead. So I think the issue is not to be offered another position because.
Well, we'll end on this. I love that story, but one of the things that we look at with companies like you're just giving an example is, those companies, they've created fair exchange with people, and they also, have limited their open cycles. But because of all the open cycles, they've created what now are silos. And I know Philip, and I know Philip is a very talented man, and he could do that job. He could do the job of 3 people, but because their law of separation, their law of hindrance, their lack of trust in people that have come before him, have limited him going into a position. And that's just something to think about, because next week we discussed the law of Caterpillar. And I encourage you to go through, read the law, listen to the law, because the law of Caterpillar is really when you're coming into your own.
Mhm.
And allowing it, and I love the law of Caterpillar because, having 2 kids, an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old, you go from a caterpillar to a chrysalis to a butterfly. So 3 steps. And that's one of the things I'm going to hit on next week is those 3 steps and kind of tie it back into everything in the law of the architect, law of exchange, law of open cycles, principle of present, law of separation, law of hindrance, and the principle of perseverance, and how that has led to the law of the caterpillar. But, I thank you all for taking time and being on this call today. For those that are going to watch this later on, thank you. But as we say in the bellwether, live well, prosper fairly, and I will see you all next week.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks again.